Hi, Shinzen.
Hi.
Thank you for this precious opportunity to ask you a few questions. And so we just finished this retreat in China, and before getting here, I asked some of my subscribers to send me whatever questions they would want to address to you. But before we get to that, maybe you could share just a few words, like how do you feel after this, Chinese retreat teaching live? Also, I understand you don't teach live that often anymore, so what's your feeling about this event?
Sure. This is my second time in China with Yan, who you know, and some of your people might also know who she is. The first time I was in China, I didn't know what to expect, honestly speaking, because I hadn't had interaction with modern China as it is. I was delighted by the reality of modern China as a successful culture. And I also felt that this is a place I can function with my knowledge of Chinese, such as it is, and with China, such as it is. It's like I went back thinking, wow, this is great. I can work here. This environment works for me. My impression this time is even more so, actually. It's like, wow, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity here. So I am in a creative mood to sort of work a program that has a lot of Chinese influence in it, but would be successful in the US as well as in China, and therefore would serve as an introduction to some of the achievements of classical Chinese civilization, particularly as they relate to modern science and reasoned conversations and so forth. So I'm feeling a lot of creative juice, but it's this time more around, it's not just a program for China, it's a program for the US and China. And it would be a similar program emphasizing beauty and creativity as a way to make the more rigorous practices that are traditional more approachable to people. So I think Yan has a good idea, and we're going to pursue it now on both sides of the Pacific Ocean.
So that was actually by far the most asked question, is when I shared how lively you are and how engaged and how, interested in so many things. So by far the most common question was, what's the secret?
I've been told many times it's difficult to categorize me. There are a lot of dimensions. But if you were to ask me how I think about myself, it would probably be two main points. I'm a person for whom the classical meditation practices, particularly in their Eastern form, but seen in the broad world contemplative context, I'm a person for whom, call it what you want, mindfulness, meditation, contemplation, it has performed as advertised for me.
It worked.
It worked. What my teachers said should happen, and in fact strongly implied would happen, in fact did happen. And if I were to characterize that, I would say they promised comprehensive well-being, multidimensional, multi-depth, and it works. At least in my case, it did work. That's sort of one side of me. Another side of me is I'm a system thinker. I think in terms of the philosophy of science that's called system science. And I think in terms of the underlying mathematics for system science, which is something called category theory, mathematical category theory. Sometimes in its applied aspect called applied category theory. So those two influences work together. The system science point of view allows you to see everything, and I mean everything, as a system. So I have a unified conceptual framework to approach any situation or any sensory experience. So what keeps me going is the fact that there's always interesting questions to ask about anything, big or small. That's the gift of system science thinking. But then the meditation gives, as I said, a multidimensional or comprehensive well-being, so that if I encounter a system that has what you might call inconvenient truth associated with it, things that are painful.
Hard to deal with emotionally.
That would be a good way to put it. Hard to deal with emotionally, either by me or by people I care about, but then I sort of care about everyone, so broadly, if there are inconvenient truths from system science, I have a way to deal with that. And the pleasant and beautiful truths, I have a way to deal with that also. So it's the interaction of system scientific curiosity that, in essence, makes everything interesting. Plus the ability to enhance the interest with sensory focus skills, and to, most significantly, deal with what in English, and you probably have similar expressions in Russian and so forth, but we call it inconvenient truth. And everyone sooner or later has to encounter a lot of inconvenient truth. We get sick, we get injured, we decline, we're going to die.
We collapse as a species.
Say what?
We collapse as a species.
Well, that would be a very inconvenient truth. I don't see that necessarily happening. But could it? Look at the history of the Earth. Yeah, it's a friendly place, but how many times have most things died? 5 or 6 times. A couple of them, it's like amazing, anything survived. So there's also the inconvenient truth that people do bad things to you, and even worse, you do bad things to other people. All of this, we need a way to face. And when the practices work as advertised, they give you that. So the world becomes a very interesting place, no matter what you might say. And that keeps me going. As you know, I had an 80th birthday here.
Yes.
And in Japan, it's actually 88. That's the big. I always thought I'll retire at 88, so I've got 8 more years. But apparently in China, anything beyond 80 is called dashou. You're like big elder now. Yes. So I passed the Chinese quantum barrier here, but the Japanese one in 8 years. But at this age, biologically, it's all about decline. I have to be very careful. The body is fragile. China, it's very easy to fall, and everything is hard. So I have to be very, very careful. I can tell there's the beginnings of intellectual decline, more towards orientation. Thank God I can still, do math and experimental
complex
thinking, but that's going to go. So in a sense, it's like all about decline, but that's an inconvenient truth that I have tools to deal with.
That was actually also one of the pretty common question is how can you love humanity that chooses to destroy itself or to hurt itself or each other in so many ways? So how is it possible to basically to love horrible or ignorant human beings?
I had a friend many years ago, a US guy, but he was Orthodox, or at least very sympathetic to the Orthodox form of Christianity. And he told me that somewhere in Orthodoxy, there's this notion that when you begin the contemplative path, you don't like to be around, quote, sinful people. But if you're successful on the contemplative path, you're actually attracted to people that are messed up. I don't know if that's true or not. It's just what one person told me. But I think there's a term, prelestie, something like that. You're like lost. You're lost. You're just fundamentally confused. How do you say it?
Prelest is like seduction, like lots of seductive things.
Yeah. So you're like just at the mercy of irrational fears and hatreds, and you're just lost as a person. So what he said was, at the beginning, you separate yourself from, and that's why you go to the monastery, and you have is it called a starets? That you study with an elder, an abbot, or something like that. So it starts with having a separation from the lost people, but it ends up, if you really are no longer lost, you actually now want to be around those people because you have a subtle gift to give, and you're able to receive their prelestie, is that it? Yes. You're able to receive that without it being a problem for you because you've somewhat catharsis has worked, you're cleaned out, you're sort of emptied out, actually. The term is kenosis in Greek. There must be a Slavic, it's like an emptying. So you carry a kind of spiritual nothing that makes lost people sort of, there's pressure behind them and there's less pressure in you. And that creates a force that draws lost people to you. And just being around them, because there's less pressure in you, it dissipates. But it works the other way. You realize that you carry a subtle nothingness that is of service. And you get fulfillment by just being in the same room with very, very lost people. I remember the first time I noticed this. I was on a plane flight and started a conversation with the person next to me. And he, what do you do? I told him I teach focus skills, mindfulness. What do you do? Well, I work for, and basically, I don't want to name the organization, but they train, it's a US thing to train police forces in South America. So to me, that's, I feel they're teaching torture techniques, and it's like, this is not my person. But I just kept my cool. I didn't say anything. I think the Vietnam War was raging, and I had very strong
opposition.
To that, So, but I just kept my cool, and I thought he's going to think I'm a weirdo because I teach Buddhist-y kind of meditation. But who cares? I'm just going to abide without getting into an argument with this person. I'm going to stay deep. And we're just talking about ordinary surface shit, basically, a little bit. And then we're about to land. And out of nowhere, I mean, totally out of left field, this guy says, sometimes I have some doubts about what I do for a living. And I'm going, where did that come from? And then I realized where that came. I without doing anything, I sort of drew that out of him. And then I realized, there's a whole level of subtle communication. So at first, you feel a separation from lost because you're beginning to be unlost. But then when you really, if you pull it off, if it performs as advertised for you, there's actually lost people are pulled towards you, and the other way around. It's like, I don't have to do anything. What the special nothing that I carry
works for you.
Yeah. I don't know, some of the people out there might be aware there's a book called The Teachings of Don Juan, a Yaqui way of knowledge. And the city where I come from is where Don Juan actually lived, in Tucson, Arizona. His house could have been down the street. Right. What was I going to say? Yes. So if you're not familiar with the book, an anthropologist named Carlos Castañeda from UCLA wanted to do an ethnographic study on the Yaqui Indian religion, which is shamanism. So he found this Yaqui Indian in Tucson, who also lived partially in Mexico sometimes. He started to interview the Indian. But what happened was, over a course of time, he lost his scientific objectivity. Yes. He was not an anthropologist anymore. He was a disciple of a shaman. Yes. And he was pulled into that world. And he wrote a book about it, which had a huge influence on my generation. Yes.
It's pretty well known in Russia and our parts as well.
Now, there are subsequent books that by that author that I'm afraid may be somewhat fictional. But I think the first book is authentic and a very interesting example of an interaction. But Don Juan, well, let me back up. Carlos, the anthropologist, in the book says to the shaman, all this weird shit happens around you. He didn't maybe use those words, but it's like, what's going on? Why are these synchronicities, these seeming coincidences, all this weird stuff happens that doesn't happen around other people?
Yes.
What's the story? And the shaman just laughed and said, you're just seeing the power of my non-doing. This is me doing nothing. And that's what I've come to see now in all the really senior masters, or not all, but most of the mature senior masters are not aware, and in fact, they don't care that all this weird stuff happens. They're simply functioning from an unfixated flow of nature, and whatever happens, happens. And it's often of benefit to the people around them. So I would say you have both in a Christian culture, in any meditative culture of the world, not just Christian, but you have this notion, and you also have the notion of China, of Wu Wei, and you have even from a pre-literate culture, authentic functioning shaman in Arizona, similar ideas. That indicates to me it's a human universal.
And the other side of this is what you call the bounce. So during the retreat here, you were telling different, stories and gave practices. And one of the talks was dedicated to a specifically Chinese contribution to Buddhist practices, and that would be what we would refer here as ho po po. So like a bubbly, sparkly liveliness.
Yes. So they had that expression in Chinese, huochan. It's like living Zen, right? And they even used the same word 1,000 years ago, huo po po. It's like bubbly, bouncy expressiveness.
Do you have any advice or view as to how to, or why would one want to develop it, or how to develop it? Because it seems to go hand in hand with that do nothing aspect and the subtle influence that you were talking about, and free expression, freely expressing oneself on the other hand.
Yes. Let me think that through. The aliveness is a communication style that tends to make people sort of charismatic. And that's actually a good thing, because it's like, okay, I'm going to listen to this person because they have some gift of being charismatic, which even itself goes back to Christianity, charisma, etc. So it's a mode of communicating. But as a mode of communicating, I wouldn't say that it's required, because in Southeast Asia, they have an incredibly flat mode of communicating that is a cultural expression. And I mean, you know, because you were there, and I know because I've also
covering with the fan while giving a Dharma talk.
Yeah.
Stuff like this.
Or while you're going in for an interview, they're reading a book like you're not even there. You know, I'm sure you experience that. It's like, what's going on? He doesn't even care what I'm saying. Well, that's a style. That maybe comes from India into Southeast Asia. But in China, the Chinese civilization worked out a different style. And I think it's good that we have that different style because it is more humanly attractive. And it makes you like a cool person. That's one aspect. And I take that to be definitely a Chinese innovation. And that's the alive expressiveness. I call it the Zen bounce in English. Another aspect, though, beyond that is it's very related to creativity, all forms of creativity, not just artistic creativity and not just, I can give a good sermon creativity, but I'm going to say scientific creativity. In my experience, my ability to do math and broadly all of science more and more seems to just come from that place. So if creativity is important, which it is, the alive Zen, even in the scientific domain, is relevant. So that's why I emphasize that aspect. Once again, it does go back to sensory training because equanimity with confusion and disorientation, which is equanimity with a kind of discomfort, a mental, emotional discomfort, as you equanimize, I make a transitive verb out of equanimity. You bring equanimity to a sensory experience. You equanimize the sensory experience. You're no longer driven to get an answer. And with time, answers start to self-organize. And this method of cultivating wisdom was discovered independently in 3 cultures. The skeptics in Greece, they were not doubters. Skeptikos means we stand back, we don't take a stand. We have, what's the term they used? Epoche. And in this state of epoche or suspended judgment, intuition arises. So it was discovered in the pre-Christian West. It was absolutely discovered with the Gongan practice, the koan in Japanese, called Gongan in the original Chinese. That practice centers around equanimity with confusion, and that's cultivated through an interaction with a chanshi, a zenji, a roshi, a Zen master. Then it was rediscovered again in Christianity. I'm more familiar with the Roman Catholic form, but St. Augustine said, Deus tam quam ignorantium cognoscimus, in Latin, which means we know God directly through a kind of cultivated not knowing. And
cultivated not knowing.
That's the way I put it. So I'm sure there's an Orthodox reflection of that somewhere. But we can train you to have equanimity with sensory and even intellectual disorientation. That's a discomfort. You don't fight with it. And if you keep it that practice up, a new way of knowing arises. So we can actually, in a modern way, independent of religion, but harmonious with the religions of the past, we can teach anyone to be intuitively creative. And that's extremely important because it's not just in the arts, it's in the sciences also where that comes into play. And if you take science seriously, you actually take equanimity with don't know, not just take it seriously, but see it as a way to make intuition trainable to anyone. And you, of course, have to then check your intuition by experiment, because your intuition might actually be wrong, even though it's spontaneous. But if experiments validate it, this is a new way to do science, to foster the spirit of scientific inquiry.
And it is as applicable to the spiritual insights as well, I suppose. You have some sort of intuition or an insight, but then you have to test it out, whether it's, like in a proverbial, waking up the next day and reading some kind of, the whole world looks like a banana kind of thing, and then like, okay, that wasn't, and you felt it really deeply the other day, but then the next day it's like, okay, it's not very
That's
applicable.
the scientific method. You might get an insight, and that insight might really be like a revelation. It's like, where did that come from? Srinivas Ramanujan used to sort of go half asleep, and he would see this veil, and then he would see blood dripping down. Now, that's sort of weird, but his version of Vishnu is Narasingha, which is like a lion thing, so it's actually sacred. And then the mathematics would appear, but without proofs. He would just know. But what he was lacking is the ability to formulate proof. I mean, he had obviously some ability, but that's why he went to England. And that's the scholars there, the cutting-edge mathematicians, they realized his intuitions were beyond them. But he had to be trained in how to rigorously prove. And the movie with Jeremy Irons and Dave Patel about the man who saw infinity, there's a movie about Ramanujan. It doesn't show him having trances and talking to Vishnu, but he did. And but the main thing was, we don't understand how this guy knows this shit. And so you see in the movie his interaction with several historical mathematicians, G.H. Hardy and Littlewood, and the other guy, I'm forgetting his name right now. That was what it was all about. So you have to, if it's math, you have to prove the theorem. If it's science, you have to perform a physical, not just one, but a gazillion physical experiments. Then you know it's true. And if you have some idea about God's telling you to tell the world about such and such, well, let's see how that idea works out. The last time that happened in China, about 10 or 20 million people died for no good reason because someone thought they were the brother of Jesus Christ. It's called Taiping Tianguo. Everyone knows about that. No wonder China's a little allergic to this kind of stuff. If you knew Chinese history, you'd realize why. So that experiment did not end well. But anyone could have predicted it, because I don't think he was the brother of Jesus Christ. By the way, he had a nervous breakdown. I think it was caused by a nervous breakdown because he repeatedly failed the imperial exams. I could be wrong about that, but it gives you, yeah. Anyway, so you got to validate it against reality. It's not enough to just be convinced.
So if you would create a coan, a koan for the modern times or for the listeners, the people who watch it, what would be a koan that can allow for this kind of creative cultivation of the unknown or the non-doing to arise and self-organize?
Tell me what works when nothing works, and bring it to me here right now. Something like that.
Thank you, Shinzen. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time and pleasure.
Well,
I love you, man.
That's a ditto, yeah. In China, we do this, right?
Thank you.
And in China, we say, 再见.